Good morning from Bear Country, California. I'm Dr. Caroline Heldman, and here are your headlines for the third week of July 2021. First up, Tom Barrack, who is a longtime friend of Donald Trump's, has been jailed for failing to register as a lobbyist for the United Arab Emirates. This actually springs from an investigation started by Bob Mueller many years ago into Trump officials who were not registered using the Foreign Agents Registration Act, meaning that if you were lobbying for a foreign government, you actually have to register as a lobbyist. This is not the first Trump administration official to be caught up in this. Paul Manafort and Rick Gates were also indicted and served jail time for failing to register as agents of foreign countries, most notably Russia. In the case of UAE, what did Tom Barrack do? Well, UAE leaders gave him a wish list of what they wanted to get done within the first 100 days of the Trump presidency, within the first 6 months of the Trump presidency, and during his time in office. And it is important to note that Tom Barrack was Trump's inaugural committee chairman. So this is a man who had a lot of access to the president. And indeed, it appears that he influenced foreign policy by making sure that a negotiation did not happen, that UAE didn't want to happen. It also appears that Tom Barrack was able to get language into a Trump speech that the UAE saw before the American public heard it. So it is really clear that, open check case, or so it appears, of influence by a foreign nation without registering as a lobbyist for such. Also, when investigators approached Tom Barrack, he lied to them and he obstructed justice. And this is all with the Department of Justice under Donald Trump soft pedaling all of this, because this is one of Trump's buddies. It is unprecedented to have 3 members of an administration indicted for lobbying on behalf of foreign nations and not being registered as lobbyists. So once again, we see the unprecedented nature of Donald Trump's presidency in ways that threaten the fabric of our democracy. Second big headline. If you have been following the news, you have seen that the Republican leadership and Republican media has done an absolute about face in terms of vaccinations. And I put up here a research report from the Journal of Public Health that actually confirms that there is indeed a statistically significant correlation between partisanship and rates of death. And I've also put up a graphic from Sean Hannity early on, talking about the coronavirus hysteria. This is important because in the last week, Sean Hannity came out and said, look, I believe in science. I believe in the science of vaccinations. Get vaccinated. What the heck is going on here? Well, as predicted when this whole thing started, there are partisan death rates because there are partisan vaccination rates, because Republicans have decided to throw in with conspiracy theorists, QAnon, anti-vaxxer folks, in order to show loyalty to the party. It's really unclear why they would want to be a death cult, but here's some data on vaccination rates from the Kaiser Family Foundation. If you can see that, these are fully vaccinated folks. So early July, you see almost half of Democrats fully vaccinated in the country, and only about a third of Republicans fully vaccinated. Has the Republican Party woken up and discovered that if people from their own party don't get vaccinated, they are dying at higher rates? This means lower votes in elections moving forward. Is it really that crass of a calculus? I wish that there wasn't a death rates being driven by partisanship and death rates being driven by hypermasculinity. But as a social scientist, all of this was predicted and is now playing out in really gross ways when it comes to life or death situations. Your next big headline, Kevin McCarthy put up his list for the January 6th commission. Pelosi nixed 2 of the candidates who were actively promoting the big lie that Donald Trump won the election, and so she didn't think they could be objective. And so McCarthy responded by pulling all 5 Republican members that he had put up. Now, Liz Cheney, who's a Republican who was appointed by Nancy Pelosi, is still on the commission, and she actually spoke out against Kevin McCarthy's antics of putting essentially folks who are not going to be objective on this commission, throwing in with, the wing nuts, folks who are ignoring data and video right in front of them, these are the folks who should have been on the committee. But actually, none of this should even be happening at this point in time. The Republicans should have supported a bipartisan commission to look into this. Instead, Nancy Pelosi, because they shot that down, Nancy Pelosi went to the playbook and said, look, we're going to use your Benghazi rules, the rules that you set up for all of these partisan commissions. We're going to establish that. And Kevin McCarthy responded by making it a three-ring circus. He didn't put up folks who were serious about this, even though, and I think this is really important to use the exact quote here, on January 13th, Kevin McCarthy acknowledged that, quote, the president, he's talking about Donald Trump at the time, the president bears responsibility for Wednesday's attack on Congress by mob rioters. He should have immediately denounced the mob when he saw what was unfolding. These facts require immediate action by Trump to accept his share of responsibility. So how do we get from folks who, use their brains and their eyes and acknowledge that the violent insurrection on January 6th had much to do with Trump's rhetoric and Trump's incitement, to now refusing to have a bipartisan investigation into this, stacking the deck, making it a circus, and then crying foul when Nancy Pelosi says, no, we actually want a real commission. So this is where we are. What we need to know is who got these folks inside for reconnaissance before the attacks. We need to know who gave them maps of underground tunnels and the way to the speaker's office. We need to look at visitor logs. What is it that Republicans are so afraid of being exposed through subpoena and power and other investigative tools by this commission? Why don't they want the truth to come out? Okay, next big headline. Republicans are set to block this infrastructure bill in Congress, the very bill that Biden had said they had bipartisan support for a month ago. It reminds me of Lucy in the football, and I put up a headline here. The progressives are eyeing the $4.1 trillion silver lining about the infrastructure talks breaking down. There are two infrastructure bills, and if the infrastructure bill that Biden thought he had bipartisan support on does not have bipartisan support, then they may combine these two bills and pass it through reconciliation, which only requires the Democrats to vote on it. Of course, all the Democrats would have to vote on it, but it looks like they might be changing strategy. So they have that option of going through the reconciliation process and putting both of these bills together. They also have the possibility of getting rid of the filibuster, which we'll get to in a moment. But at the end of the day, Republicans really are doing this Lucy in the football bit, right? Which is that they are trying to run the clock out. They know that they're likely to retake the House of Representatives as the pendulum tends to have a big partisan swing in midterm elections, meaning the elections between presidential elections. Whoever is in the White House, the House of Representatives, and even the Senate, for folks who are up for re-election there, tends to swing in the opposite direction. So Republicans know that they are likely to get into power in a year and a half. And so they're doing what they did with President Obama, who had a Democratic Congress his first couple of years. They're running the clock out so they don't pass major legislation. And they're doing it by saying, no, we're at the table. We are bargaining, we're compromising, and then that's not what they want to do. Just a quick point of note that one of the sticking points for Republicans with this infrastructure bill is that one way to pay for it is the Democrats want the IRS to do a better job of holding the wealthiest Americans accountable for their tax bills, and Republicans are standing against that. So let's talk about the filibuster, our next headline. We've talked a bit about this on the show. Joe Biden came out and said, look, you will throw Congress into chaos and nothing will get done if you get rid of this filibuster. And what he's talking about is not so much the actual logistics of the filibuster, meaning the ability of one senator to stand in the way of major legislation, which therefore requires that 60% of the Senate be behind any major piece of legislation, unless you go through budget reconciliation. What he's saying is that the Republicans, if there's an attempt to get rid of the filibuster, the Republicans will use that in order to even further delay major policy legislation, right? The passage of major legislation. What they will do is they will focus on that. They will drag out the filibuster fight, and that will prevent major action from happening. So he stands against that. So I guess, well, that's where we are on that. Joe Biden still holding on to his nostalgia for how the Senate used to work. Last big headline, shocker, 3 months ago, Comcast actually came out and said that it would pull money from Georgia lawmakers who supported the draconian bill, the voting rights, the voter suppression law that says that you can't even give water to people who are waiting in line. And of course, they then flipped and have now given money to the Attorney General Chris Carr, who vigorously defended the law, this voter suppression law. But Comcast is not the only company to do that. At least 4 other companies that pulled their funding, or at least said they would pull their funding from candidates who were trying to suppress the vote in the state of Georgia, have now done an about face, and they have given money to candidates that support that. Why? Well, because corporations that take these stances are always doing it for a profit motive. They're always ultimately looking at profit. And so they will take principled stances as long as public pressure is on, and when the foot is off the gas pedal, for these social movements, when they're no longer hot or hip, or folks don't care about these issues, then they do an about face. Why? Because we have the best democracy that money can buy. You may hear my little kitty Zora trying to get in, or may have heard the squawking parrots. It's been a lively day here in Bear Country. As you head out into your day or stay home, please be gentle with yourself, be kind to others, and rock on.